All right, so ready to jump into some of the biggest headlines coming out of India today. Looks like we've got a pretty interesting mix, or everything from entertainment and sports to politics, even a record-breaking pipeline.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really a fascinating glimpse into what's happening in India today, all the contrasts and the complexities.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, let's kick things off with a story that's been kind of blowing up online. Remember that whole controversy with YouTuber Ashish Chanchalani and that podcast, India's Got Latent?
Oh yeah, definitely. That was quite a stir for sure. A lot of backlash after that controversial question. Even ended up in court, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, today, Ashish actually finally broke his silence. He put out a video asking fans for support, and he acknowledged how serious it all was and said he's committed to learning from it.
Huh. Interesting. It really shows how everyone is held accountable online these days, especially influencers. And, these apology videos are practically an art form now, and this one seems pretty sincere, but it does make you think, how do we actually hold these influential people accountable for what they say and do, especially when it's all happening out there so publicly?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a tough balance between wanting to hold people accountable, but also understanding that everyone makes mistakes. But speaking of high stakes, let's switch gears over to the cricket world for a minute. India's team is getting ready for a pretty major semifinal match against Australia at the Champions Trophy in Dubai.
Oh, yeah, the battle for cricket supremacy, this is going to be a good one. I've heard some people saying that India might actually have home field advantage because it's in Dubai.
Right, but Captain Rohit Sharma totally shut that down, didn't he? I mean, he made it clear that Dubai is definitely not India's home turf, and he was saying that the pitches over there change all the time, so you can't really predict or manipulate what they'll be like.
Yeah, that's true. Dubai's International Stadium is known for being a bit unpredictable with those pitches. They've been changing them pretty often, so no team really knows what to expect until they get out there.
And Sharma was really emphasizing that being able to adapt is key,
Yeah.
especially since they'll be playing on a brand new pitch for the semifinal. It seems like his focus is on what he can control, like how well the team prepares and their ability to think on their feet when they're out there.
Yeah,
So,
sounds like a solid strategy. And I mean, India has been undefeated in the group stage, even though they had to play on three totally different pitches. So it seems like they're pretty well equipped to handle whatever comes their way.
yeah, for sure. Okay, let's switch gears again to something a little more serious, public health. There's a new study out from The Lancet that says India could have something like 440 million people who are overweight or obese by 2050.
Wow, yeah, those numbers are pretty alarming. It really shows how important it is to address this growing problem, especially for young people. The study actually says that young people in India might end up having the highest rates of obesity in the world.
That's a serious wake-up call. So
Okay.
are there any policies or initiatives in place to tackle this?
Well, there are some, but it's a pretty complicated issue to solve. Prime Minister Modi has said that obesity is a big challenge for the country. And experts are calling for some changes in how we diagnose it, like looking at things like waist to hip ratio instead of just BMI to get a more accurate picture.
Right, that makes sense. It's not just about personal choices. We have to look at the bigger picture too, like whether people have access to healthy food, how cities are designed to encourage people to be active, and even how unhealthy products are advertised.
Exactly. It's a multi layered problem that needs everyone to work together: the government, healthcare systems, and communities.
Okay, well, now for a story that really shows India's commitment to progress. They're about to unveil the world's longest LPG pipeline. It's a 2,800-kilometer pipeline going all the way from Kandla in the west to Gorakhpur in the north.
Wow, that's incredible. That must have taken some serious engineering. I heard it's supposed to be running by June 2025, and it could really change the game for how fuel is supplied in India.
Yeah, it's replacing a lot of those trucks that used to transport LPG on the roads, which was not only inefficient, but also pretty dangerous.
Oh, for sure. This is a big step towards making fuel deliveries safer and more affordable.
Absolutely. And, I think this project shows that India is serious about investing in its future, not just in terms of building things, but also making sure things are done safely and efficiently.
No doubt about it. It sends a powerful message. But hey, switching gears for a sec, things are getting a little heated on the diplomatic front. India is not too happy with what the UN human rights chief had to say about Kashmir and Manipur. They're calling the comments unfounded and baseless.
Yeah, this isn't the first time India has been criticized on the world stage about
Yeah.
human rights.
Yeah, it's a tough spot for them. They have to defend their own interests, but also maintain good relationships with other countries.
India's UN representative, Ambassador Arindam Bakshi, basically accused the UN official of distorting the facts and ignoring what's actually happening on the ground.
Wow, he didn't hold back. It was a strong defense of India's commitment to democracy and human rights. But it also shows how tricky international diplomacy can be and how hard it is to get everyone on the same page when it comes to sensitive issues.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, let's move on to something a little more positive in the tech and economic world. Amazon Web Services, AWS, is making a massive investment in India, like a whopping $8.2 billion.
Wow, that's huge. It really shows that the big global tech companies see a lot of potential in India. They're clearly betting on India becoming a major player in the global tech scene.
Yeah, most of this money is going towards expanding AWS's cloud infrastructure in Maharashtra. They'll be bringing in some really advanced technologies, and it could really shake things up across the entire tech industry.
And think about the impact on the economy. Some estimates say it could add like $15.3 billion to India's GDP every year and create over 81,000 jobs just in the data center supply chain. That's a big boost.
Definitely. And this move fits with AWS's overall commitment to India. They see how fast the demand for cloud services and AI is growing there, and they're basically going all in on India's digital future.
Yeah, it seems like a smart move. India is already a powerhouse in IT, and with the middle class growing so fast and more people getting online, that demand for cloud services is only going to keep skyrocketing.
Okay, so now let's look at the trade relationship between India and the U.S. because things are starting to feel a little tense over there. India's trade minister, Piyush Goyal, is heading to the U.S. for some emergency talks about these new tariffs that President Trump is proposing.
Oh, yeah. Those reciprocal tariffs could have a huge impact on trade between the two countries. We're talking billions of dollars. It would affect all sorts of things: cars, agriculture, food products.
Yeah, and Goyal's main goal is to try and get some relief for Indian businesses and to figure out exactly what these tariffs would mean. He's also hoping to make some progress on a trade deal that would boost trade between the two countries to something like $500 billion by 2030.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation for India. On the one hand, they want to protect their own industries, especially agriculture, where millions of farmers could be hurt by these tariffs. But on the other hand, they don't want to mess up their relationship with the U.S., which is their biggest trading partner.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what happens with these talks. It could have a big impact on the future of the U.S.-India relationship.
No doubt about it, this is a really important moment for both countries. It's kind of funny, though, right? We're talking about all these trade tensions, and then you have Amazon Web Services making that huge investment. It seems like there are two different messages coming from the U.S. Businesses are all in on India, but the government seems to be getting tougher.
That's a good point. I guess it just shows how global economics and politics don't always line up. Companies like Amazon see a lot of opportunity in India's market, but then you have government policies that can sometimes make things difficult.
And it makes you wonder how all of this stuff going on in the global economy will affect things inside India, politically, I mean. We were talking about the decline of the Bahujan Samaj Party, and you have to wonder how those kinds of shifts in power will affect things like economic policy and social programs.
Totally, yeah. The BSP's decline could definitely create space for other parties with different agendas. It's something to keep an eye on, that's for sure. Oh, and speaking of politics, we have to talk about the Trinamool Congress's accusations of voter ID fraud. They're saying there are all these duplicate ID numbers that could let people vote in more than one state.
That's pretty serious. If it's true, it would raise some major concerns about how fair elections are in India. And I mean, that's a pretty big deal for any democracy.
Right. And the TMC is demanding that the Election Commission admit there's a problem and fix it immediately. They've even threatened to release more evidence if they don't take it seriously.
Well, the Election Commission has said they're aware of the reports, and they're working on updating their systems to fix any problems. But it definitely shows how important it is for people to trust the system and know that elections are being run fairly.
For sure. Okay, let's take a step back and look at a story that really shows the balancing act that India often had to do on the world stage. Israel is pushing India to officially call Hamas a terrorist organization.
Yeah, that's after those Hamas leaders were seen hanging out with other banned groups in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. It puts India in a tough position, especially since they have close relationships with both Israel and Palestine.
To really get why this is so complicated, we need to look at the bigger picture. India has always been against terrorism, no matter who's doing it, and they've always supported Israel's right to defend itself. But they've also been pushing for a two-state solution and supported Palestine becoming a member of the UN.
Right, exactly. So if they label Hamas as a terrorist organization, it would definitely bring them closer to Israel and probably the U.S. too. but it could also damage their relationship with Palestine and make it harder for them to be a neutral mediator in the region.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where there are no easy answers. Every decision has a potential downside.
Okay, so let's go back to public health for a minute. That projection about India having over 440 million overweight or obese people by 2050 is pretty scary. It's a problem that needs to be addressed now.
It's like a ticking time bomb. And it's not just about individual health either. Obesity has a huge impact on the economy and society as a whole. It puts a strain on healthcare systems, people are less productive, and there's a lot of social stigma too.
Public health initiatives are great, but what can actually be done to tackle this problem, like concrete steps?
Well, I think it's going to take a multifaceted approach. We need to teach people about healthy eating habits, start awareness campaigns early on, like even in schools.
I totally agree. And we have to think about cost and accessibility. Healthy food needs to be affordable and easy to find, especially for people in lower income communities.
And what about getting people to be more active? I mean, Indian cities are getting more and more crowded. Traffic is a nightmare. How do we encourage people to get moving in that kind of environment?
We need to create safe places where people can be, active parks, walking trails, sports facilities, and maybe we could incentivize people to bike or walk instead of driving.
It seems like we need to look beyond just individual behavior and address the bigger issues that contribute to obesity, things like poverty, food insecurity, lack of access to healthcare.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about creating an environment that makes it easier for people to make healthy choices.
You know, it's interesting to compare Amazon's big investment in India with the struggles that Ola Electric is having. It shows just how dynamic and challenging the Indian economy can be.
It's a pretty stark contrast. You have this global giant pouring billions into India's digital infrastructure, which shows they have a ton of confidence in the country's future. But then you have Ola, a homegrown company that was a pioneer in the EV space, and they're having to make some really tough decisions just to stay afloat.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder that growth isn't always smooth sailing. There will be bumps along the way. And to be successful, companies have to adapt, come up with new ideas, and be okay with not knowing what's going to happen next.
It also makes you think about what the government can do to help create a business environment where both domestic companies and foreign investors can succeed and where everyone has a fair shot.
Yeah, it's a complicated balance, and it'll be interesting to see how things play out over the next few years.
Okay, so speaking of complicated, let's talk about that story with Israel and Hamas. It really highlights how complex the world of international security can be.
Right. To understand what's going on, we need to look at the history. India has always tried to stay neutral in international conflicts. That's their policy of non-alignment. They've worked hard to maintain good relationships with both Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, and they've even helped with peace talks between the two. So labeling Hamas as a terrorist organization would be a pretty big shift for India.
It would definitely bring them closer to Israel and the U.S., but it could also hurt their relationship with Palestine and make it harder for them to be a neutral player in the region.
It's a tough decision, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Okay, so let's switch gears back to the online world. There's been a lot of buzz about the controversy with YouTuber Ashish Chaunchlani and that podcast, India's Got Latent.
Yeah, it's really started a conversation about how accountable people are for what they say online, especially people like him who have so many followers.
Ashish put out a video today talking about what happened and asking his fans to stick with him. He admitted that it was a serious situation, said he was sorry, and said he's going to learn from it.
It's tricky. I mean, we definitely need to hold public figures accountable for what they say and do.
Yeah.
But we also have to recognize that everyone makes mistakes, and when someone offers a sincere apology, we should at least consider it.
It'll be interesting to see how this whole thing affects his content going forward and how he deals with being an influencer in a world that's constantly changing.
Definitely. It just shows how powerful words can be, especially online where things can go viral and have a lasting impact.
Okay, now let's talk about something that shows just how ambitious India is when it comes to building infrastructure, the world's longest LPG pipeline.
That's right, over 2,800 kilometers connecting Kandla in the west all the way to Gorakhpur in the north.
And it's a big deal for how India gets its fuel. It's going to make things more efficient, it'll cut down on transportation costs, and it's safer because it's replacing a lot of those trucks that were carrying LPG on the roads.
It's also a big step towards making India less reliant on other countries for fuel. They're working towards energy security.
Absolutely. The pipeline really shows how committed India is to modernization and their vision for a sustainable future.
Yeah, it's a real symbol of progress and a reminder that investing in infrastructure is crucial for economic growth and development.
We've covered a lot today, from trade wars and political drama to these huge infrastructure projects and the changing world of online influence. What are your main takeaways from all of this news from India?
It's pretty clear that India is a country that's on the move. They're facing some tough challenges, but they're also making real progress in a lot of areas. The stories we've talked about today really show how dynamic and diverse India is.
And what really stands out to me is how resilient and adaptable India is, whether it's dealing with global economic uncertainty, trying to solve public health problems, or figuring out how to manage their relationships with other countries. They're always looking for solutions.
And it's clear that India is at a turning point. Things are changing in a big way: technology, infrastructure, politics, even social norms. It's a time of a lot of change and uncertainty, but there's also a lot of opportunity and potential.
It's going to be fascinating to see how all of this plays out and shapes the future of India.
I totally agree. This is a story that's still unfolding, and we're lucky to be watching it happen. It's really interesting how all these stories, even though they seem kind of separate, actually connect back to the big things that are happening in India right now. Like that pipeline we were talking about, it's not just about building something, it's about energy, the economy, even the environment.
You're so right. It shows how progress in one area can have a ripple effect on everything else. And speaking of interconnectedness, remember we were talking about the electric vehicle market in India earlier. We were discussing how Ola Electric is restructuring and having to let go of some employees to try and become more profitable.
Yeah, and I think it shows just how hard it is to get EV production going on a large scale, especially when the market is changing so quickly. Ola's dealing with high costs, not as much demand as they expected, and they've had to offer big discounts to stay competitive.
And it sounds like they're trying to make things more efficient by using automation, hoping that will increase profits and productivity while lowering costs. But this is their second round of layoffs in just a few months, which makes it seem like they're really feeling the pressure to start making money.
Yeah, I think it shows that even in a booming industry like EVs, success isn't a guarantee. Companies have to be able to adapt, manage their money well, and find ways to stand out in a crowded market.
It also makes you think about what the government can do to help the EV sector grow. How can they support both domestic and international companies and make sure everyone is playing by the same rules?
That's a really important question. Incentives for people to buy EVs, investments in charging infrastructure, and clear regulations are all key. India has set some pretty ambitious goals for EV adoption, so the government needs to create the right environment for it to happen.
Now let's look at a story that shows how things are changing in Indian politics. The Bahujan Samaj Party, which used to be a powerful voice for Dalit votes, is losing influence.
Yeah, and a lot of people are saying it's because of decisions made by their leader, Mayawati, like when they broke their alliance with the Samajwadi Party. There's also talk about internal power struggles and a potential successor being kicked out of the party.
And they haven't done well in elections lately. They only won one seat in the 2022 Uttar Pradesh Assembly elections, and then in the 2024 general elections, they didn't win any.
It makes you wonder what will happen to the BSP in the future. Can they stay relevant in a political landscape that's constantly changing? Can they change their strategies and appeal to a wider range of voters?
It definitely highlights how tough it is to maintain momentum in politics.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes you think about what this means for the representation of Dalit interests in Indian politics going forward.
It's something we'll have to keep an eye on, for sure. Okay, so our last headline for today is about something that's crucial for any democracy: fair elections. The Trinamool Congress is saying that the Election Commission is committing fraud. They say they have proof of duplicate voter ID numbers in different states.
And they're saying that these duplicate IDs could let people vote multiple times, which would obviously be a huge problem for fair elections.
The TMC is demanding a full investigation, and they want the issue fixed right away. They're even saying they'll release more evidence if no one takes them seriously.
The Election Commission has said they're aware of the reports, and they're working on fixing any problems with their systems. But it definitely makes you question how reliable India's electoral system really is.
Absolutely. Fair elections are the foundation of any democracy. It's so important that these allegations are investigated thoroughly and that the Election Commission is completely transparent and accountable for making sure elections are fair.
But we've covered a lot today, haven't we? Everything from trade wars and political scandals to massive construction projects and what's happening online. It's been quite a journey.
It just goes to show that India is a country that's incredibly diverse and complex. It's always changing, facing challenges head on, and trying to figure out its place in the world.
And what I find most remarkable is the energy and resilience that we see in all of these stories. India is a country that never stops moving, a country with a rich past and a future that's full of possibilities.
It's been great diving into these headlines with you today and getting a better understanding of what's shaping India right now. We hope you found this deep dive interesting and something to think about.
We hope you'll keep exploring these topics and keep talking about the things that are important to you. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.